in your app store. We continue our conversation this morning with Position 1 Yakima School Board Director, because we have the incumbent here, Graciela Villanueva. Good morning, Miss Villanueva.
Good morning, Lance Dave. Thanks for having me.
You got it. You got it.
Thank you.
First of all, how long have you been on the board? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What do you do for a living? How long you been on the board, and why you're running for re-election? A whole bunch of questions there. I'll follow up. But anyway, I guess first of all, tell us who you are.
Sure. My name is Graciela Villanueva, as you've mentioned. I've been on the board for 10 years. I'm a local girl. I grew up in Toppenish, graduating from Toppenish High School, then moved to the big city of Yakima when I was 18 and have lived here ever since.
I bet that was a culture shock.
It really was.
Was it really?
I remember moving here thinking, how am I ever going to find my way around Yakima? It's so big. There's so many roads. That lasted for maybe about a week or so, but I have worked really hard. I had all my college locally. I went to YVC and Heritage. It was Heritage College there before it was a university there in Toppenish, and then went to WSU Tri-Cities for my graduate degree, and I drove there twice a week for classes, and have worked locally my entire life, and I'm happy to be a lifelong resident of the Yakima Valley. I've been on the board for 10 years. Initially applied to be appointed to the board 10 years ago when my son was in middle school, and wanted to ensure that my son and all the kids in Yakima had access to a quality education.
So one son, other kids?
One son, and I have a stepdaughter as well, who's 16 going on 21.
Of course. of course, yes.
They all do
Been
that.
there, done that. Why are you running? Why are you running for re-election?
Well, my entire time that I've been on the board really has been around access to a quality education to all of our kids. We have 16,000 kids in Yakima schools, and they are incredibly smart, amazing kids. And I want to make sure that we have an educational system that supports each and every one of them, that recognizes their individuality and provides them the support that they need to be successful in school.
Well, what do you mean by access,
Yeah.
if I may jump in? Because I would think, hey, there's the school, there's the door, come on in. Don't we do that? What do you mean by access?
Well, one of the challenges that we've seen recently in kids, you may have seen some billboards around town around a district goal increasing attendance. So a lot of the kids don't attend school every day. We have a high number of kids who are considered chronic absent. And when we dig into reasons why kids aren't in school, sometimes it's transportation issues. Sometimes kids are, older siblings in particular, are staying at home to care for younger siblings because childcare is an issue. So that isn't, to me, it isn't equal access. And so that's an example of what I mean by that.
Well, okay,
if kids can't get to school, we need to make sure that they have transportation so they can get to school.
All right, but I mean, I gotta pay for babysitters for my younger kids.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that an issue? The school should be, I mean, school time starts here. How far do we go on each individual to make them, do I go pick them up? I mean, that to me seems, I mean, it sounds good, but how does it play out practically?
Well, practically, I guess there's a couple of examples. For some families, we have a number of kids who are considered homeless, for example. In that case, those families need to be aware of the services that are available to them federally under the McKinney-Vento Act, and in that case, the schools do go pick those kids up. So whatever those resources are, when it comes to younger kids and childcare who maybe aren't school age yet, childcare is really expensive. I remember when my son was in prior to kindergarten, we were paying for childcare. It's really, really expensive, and if sometimes you can't afford that. If you have a couple of kids, maybe that doesn't work, or if one kid is sick and they can't go to daycare, someone needs to stay home with that child, and so maybe it can't be mom or dad because they have to work to provide for their families. So I think it's a really complex issue. I don't necessarily think that the school district should provide all of the answers, but I think that there's more that we could do to help.
All right, after 10 years on the job and that being a goal of yours, what kind of track record is there of Yakima increasing access for everybody then?
Well, one of the things that we focused on is ensuring that our parents, our students and parents are informed about the services that are available to them. We've changed some processes in the central registration office, for example, when a student or family registers for school. If there's a change in address or if something's going on, we've asked the central registration office to ask some additional questions to families to get to whether there might be some challenges with homelessness and different things like that. So that's one example. With COVID particularly, and kids really struggling with mental health challenges, to be honest, after being isolated for 18 months, that's been really, really hard. We've worked really hard to ensure that we ramp up and increase the mental health services that we're able to provide to students. So those are a couple of examples.
So if we got billboards around saying we got to improve attendance, where are we at compared to where we were 10 years ago? I mean, I'm looking for, is there a track record of progress to the things that you say you're concerned about bringing about? That comes with being an incumbent, right? You have a track record to compare. So where are we at in terms of attendance? Have we made the needle move? And if we have, why do we have billboards?
You know, in some cases we have, in other cases we haven't. There's been, the state has changed the way we track attendance over time, and so that's kind of hard to look at that data. Most recently, we have a new strategic plan that was developed in partnership with school staff, students, and the community at large. And one of those measurements is attendance. I'd have to refer to the data to look at where we were at. I want to say we're at like 70% or 60% chronic late or chronic absenteeism, and so the goal is to get that to 95% full attendance, and so that is a new goal that was set as part of the strategic plan a couple of years ago, and each school is tasked with ensuring that is carried out. Yesterday,
does that come from the state, or is that locally developed?
That's locally developed. Okay. Yeah, and so yesterday, as a matter of fact, I had a presentation with McClure McClure Elementary School in Yakima, and they had a really neat presentation where they broke down that goal into annual and quarterly goals, things that they're going to look at for all of their students, and extra supports that they're going to put in. For example, if a kid is absent 2 times, teachers then is going to call home to find out what's going on and what additional supports might the school be able to provide, if any.
I got to tell you, not being antagonistic, but as a parent, my kid wasn't there a couple of times. You wouldn't be coming up with a program to call out in 2021. I mean, I'm a little perplexed by some of what I hear from school districts in terms of where we're at on the quote common sense scale, to be honest with you. I understand there's regulations and things that you got to do, and the state sends you certain things, and there's certain things that you have to do as far as contracts and unions and all of that. A day in the life of a school board member, what do you guys, how do you guys conduct your work on those kinds of things? Like in terms of coming up with an initiative or policy, I mean, who on the board has a background in education? Are there any education trained folks? Like you're a human resources person, totally vital to today's workplace and how things go, but doesn't necessarily speak to educational initiatives. Do we have anybody on the board, or do we rely back to the superintendent and staff for that sort of thing?
The school board is made up of community members. I think we have one school board member who has a background in education. School board members each spend a significant amount of time reading and learning and attending continuing education conferences so that we can learn and understand what the latest and greatest is out there in education. And so that's certainly a large part of the education that we have. There's a whole
development track for you guys, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And we do also, of course, rely on the superintendent and the superintendent staff who are, highly trained and qualified. That's why they were hired into those positions, to provide that information. We are a very inquisitive board. We ask a lot of questions. We ask for data. We ask for backup. We don't necessarily just trust what's told to us, and so that's an important part of being a board member is
Healthy
understanding.
skepticism, right? Yeah,
absolutely.
Show
absolutely.
me. Right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Lance, go ahead.
KKIT News Time 8:28. We are speaking with Yakima School Board candidate and Yakima School Board Director, Miss Graciela. I'm going to get that right. Graciela
Yes.
Villanueva. I love that name. Anyway, do you believe that maybe attendance is one of the biggest challenges of the district?
It's one of the challenges. I think the district has a number of challenges. We're such a large district. We're in considered a high poverty district, and there's pretty clear data that shows that kids in poverty struggle more in school. And so, when you look at our graduation rate, though it's increased pretty significantly over the last 10 years, it still isn't 100%, and that's something that's important. The state recently changed the graduation requirement from 22 credits to 24 credits. That means that somebody in high school cannot fail even one class in their high school career. If they do, they may not graduate. So I think there's a number of challenges. And I think looking at the reasons that kids, for example, don't graduate on time, which really is the goal of school, right? You graduate on time, you're prepared for college or work or whatever your next phase is. Attendance is one of those things that impacts graduation rate. So focusing on the various factors that will impact graduation rate, I think, are important to get us there.
We want to get into some of the items that have made news nationally, not necessarily here, but I think because we're at a time in this country where people have some portions of the population have chosen to push back against aspects of leadership. We've seen people show up at some school board meetings and have been concerned about whether they're truly being heard or not, and that sort of thing. And some of the subject matter, from CRT to sex ed to other types of topics. So we're going to want to get into that a little bit in this next half hour. If you could stick around with us, Lance going to take a break for news here in just a couple of minutes, and then we'll pick this back up because there's there's a number of issues I think that people look to. And one thing that I wanted to ask about, and only got a couple of seconds left here, is you were on board the council when the state did away with the WASL testing, weren't you? That's been within the last 10 years?
I believe so.
Yeah. Do you have, as a school board member, do you have in your own mind a clear-cut sense of what it is a person should know and know how to do when they say, see a school, and they flip their mortarboard up into the air and they walk out into the world? Do you, in your mind, do you have a pretty clear idea what they should have capabilities of doing at that point? I mean, isn't that the whole point about school, is to prep you for that moment going forward?
Yeah, that really would be looking at the graduation, the Washington State graduation standards and what those things are. There's a certain level of math proficiency, English proficiency, world history, Washington State history. I think it would be those things that would be the expectation.
But is that your expectation? A lot of people were concerned we were teaching to the test and not making some kind of full or well-rounded education. The teachers were frustrated by that. So clearly there's some information that we figure that a student needs to know to be able to function in society, and there's some information that they should know in order to function happily and effectively in society. I mean, it's some of both. Does that ring true to you?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about what that next step is in life for students, be it college or work or the military, there is certain proficiency. You have to know how to read, and you have to know you have to be able to understand what it is you're reading. You need to have some basic math skills. So those things. Another thing that I think would be vitally important is to be civically engaged. These young people are part of our community, and they will be voting, and so they need to understand how voting impacts them and how positions like school board and city council and other positions like that impact them as well. So I think civic engagement is an important part of that. And
are we meeting that, you think, within our district with those kinds of subject matters going forward?
I think in a general sense we are around reading and math. I think there's some work to do around civic knowledge and civic engagement. I think that's changing. Just last week, a group of students put together a forum for school board candidates, completely organized by the students. It was very, very impressive. It was very well put together, very efficient event. And the event went an hour long because there were so many questions from students. And so that really gave me hope for this next generation and seeing how civically involved they are and wanting to know who their school board members are and how they might represent them.
Very well. Thank you very much for that. We are going to take a break for news from Lance, and we'll be back with our conversation with Ms. Villanueva when the morning news continues. News Talk 1280 KIT. Well, we have had a couple of questions from listeners, and they kind of tie into where we want to go next. We are speaking with, let's see if I can get it right,
Okay.
this team. Graciela Villanueva. Hey, how about that?
Yay.
All right. And she is the incumbent and has been in office for 10 years. And it's a 4-year term, is it? Or 2-year? Yeah, 4-year term, right. Because you were appointed. You didn't have to, the first, yeah, okay. Her mic. Best to get your mic on. That's might give you a greater chance to answer there. My apologies.
Thanks.
We have been talking with all of our candidates, and you yourself say you're not really familiar with what the Progressive Voters Guide is. We're a conservative radio station, so we're unabashedly conservative. That's where we come from. So as this is out there as a resource for everybody online to see, we're just boring that information as part of our saying. So where do you find yourself? So before we say what they say about you, what do you say about you in terms of politics and bringing politics to the job? Certainly we're hearing that across the nation. That's what a big chunk of the fight is over nationwide, almost to the point of being domestic terrorists. Oops, we apologize. If, in fact, you're a parent coming to a school board. So your just general thoughts on that, ma'am.
You know, I think that's been an unfortunate phenomenon that we've seen across the country, particularly for school board elections. I really don't think that partisan politics belong in on the school board or in schools. I've worked really hard to talk to folks from all walks of life, both on the, I guess, what would be considered conservative and progressive, and hear what they want for their kids and ensure that I'm working to represent the entire community at the board table. So.
Sure. Well, okay. If it could be that way, a better world it would be. This is what the Progressive Voters Guide says about you. Basically, that you've got an actionable vision for the school district that includes improving learning goals, equitable outcomes. And there's that word, equitable outcomes. And that's a bugaboo word for a lot of folks who believe in equal opportunity, but not necessarily equal outcomes based on, in life, what you bring to the table, what you do with what you're given, how it applies, all of that. So how do you define equitable outcomes? I mean, are there not going to be kids who get A's and kids who get D's and F's?
I think that still will happen, kids getting different grades. I think when I think about equitable outcomes, that means to me that every kid has had the opportunity, the same opportunities, the same educational supports, whatever educational supports they need. Sometimes, and I misstated that each student receives the supports they need in order to achieve those equitable outcomes. Some kids might really struggle with reading. They might need some extra reading support. Some kids might struggle with math. They might need some extra math support. So if you think about your kids, if you have 2 kids, they probably have very different needs. They probably have very different learning styles. You parent them differently because they have different needs. And so providing each child with supports they need to be successful would be what my goal would be.
All right. My daughter was in the Yakima district for a period of time. She was in the, what did they call that? Highly capable program. She had some skills and abilities in some areas that were significantly above her peer group. Others, not so much. But how do you feel the district is doing to meet the enrichment needs of kids who have more in the tank for certain aspects? Are we meeting those needs, do you think?
More in the tank, you mean like the highly capable kids, your daughter
like
as an
you
example?
got a 5th grader who
Sure.
is writing papers at a 10th grade level and who can really process information and or who has a penchant for science.
Sure.
Are we meeting the highly capable? Because that's a state mandated program, right?
It is, and I think the intent of the highly capable program is to provide extra opportunity and challenges to those kids who are considered highly capable. I think there's some things that we've done as a district, when you, particularly at the high school level, the IB program at Davis and the honors or advanced placement classes at Ike. I think there's a lot more that we can do to ensure that all kids, whether you're on the lower end of the scale and you need extra supports for just the basics, or on the higher end of the scale, we should be providing the challenges and supports for all of those kids. So in your daughter's case, absolutely, let's provide her with those opportunities. I'm not sure that school districts have really done that well, because there is the focus on the lower achieving kids.
I would say they haven't, and I guess that's I would task you as a incumbent, and if you return, to make that one of the places that you look at too. If you got young people with exceptional skills, if they have to wait till they're a senior in high school to take advanced placement classes, they have missed a big part of the boat in the journey. So,
KIT News Time 8:53. Have you ever felt? Let's just start talking a little bit about CRT, or however, whatever the controversy is, and the domestic terrorism that some have called parents. Have you felt threatened? How do you feel about CRT, and kind of how I guess the news media has kind of played out and kind of labeled parents as well?
Yeah, I think critical race theory is really misunderstood. It's a college level curriculum, and I'll be honest, I didn't study that in college. I know that we're not teaching CRT in Yakima Public Schools. We have no plans to. What this district is committed to, and what I as a candidate and board member is committed to, is ensuring that our policies and processes are looked at through the lens of equity. We want to make sure that every kid has the opportunity to be successful in school, and so looking at all of our practices through the lens of equity to identify what groups of kids are being left behind or advancing, and ensuring that whatever that outcome is, that we're providing the supports needed to ensure that there's that equitable opportunity.
Well, here's the thing. They're going to get out of school, and then life's going to kick in, and it's a different, all of the props and prompts aren't going to necessarily be there for kids. So obviously we want them all to have the best opportunity going forward. There are critics of CRT who say that it is being sold as equity, because CRT is like red alert for parents to freak out. The idea that that you have to ensure equity today or going forward, you have to discount what has been before, and you can teach us or tell us with a surety that there's no class schedule material that looks at the whole concept of white privilege and those kind of conversations. We've heard of exercises in schools around the country where young kids are asked to assume the identities of someone else, so they, quote, know what that feels like, and those kinds of things that are, I think, are what upsetting to a lot of parents. But you're totally confident that none of that is taking place in the Yakima district?
I'm confident that critical race theory is not being taught in Yakima schools. Each individual curriculum that teachers implement, there's a process that parents can participate in reviewing that curriculum and providing that input. To my knowledge, what you've described, Dave, is not currently being taught in Yakima schools, and that there are no plans to do that.
We do hear in some schools things where kids can basically can be treated in a fashion outside of parental involvement. You can get some kinds of information from school. You can get some sort of medical help or advice at school, things like that. With the sort of values that this community holds, does any of that kind of stuff happen in Yakima? That if I want to go and get all kinds of of I'm a 17-year-old girl or a guy, birth control information, that kind of stuff. Is that available through our school district?
Specifically that kind of medical information, I don't know. I know that as a board, we feel, and me individually as a candidate, feel strongly that we need to ensure that our students are safe and that they have access to accurate information. I am fairly certain that we're not distributing birth control pills in schools. That's certainly not part of
Not
what
in
we're
shop
doing.
class anyway, right?
Yeah. So, access to information is important. And so I don't know that we'd restrict a website, for example, that, teaches kids about, their reproductive health care or anything like that. But the focus really is on their education and ensuring that they graduate on time. And so that really is all of our focus. We certainly would not be breaking any laws around things that we can inform students of or provide to students. So certainly compliance with law is absolutely important. And at the end of the day, my focus really is let's make sure that our kids are graduating on time. And that means that they're in school, that they, know how to read at grade level, that they're, doing whatever level of math that they need to do, they understand science and all of those basics.
I take it that you or any other board members don't feel threatened by parents when they're. Have you had any instances like that we've heard about around the country?
No, I think Yakima School District has been really lucky in that way. I have some counterparts in Walla Walla, for example, running for a school board who really have felt threatened and are afraid. And so that really is unfortunate that topics like critical race theory and other things but my sense really is that it's misunderstood and that it's causing people to feel unsafe. I have not experienced that in Yakima at all.
Well, you got about 30 strong seconds. Remind us why you should go back to office.
We have a really strong new strategic plan in place. COVID kind of put things on pause, but as we ramp back up and hopefully keep our schools open, there is a lot of really incredible work that's going to begin to happen in Yakima schools in ensuring that all of our kids have those opportunities to be successful in school. I'm really excited to see that strategic plan come to fruition and sincerely hope that I get to be a part of that. We're doing a lot of good work and we have a lot of good things to come.